Today we're going to take a look at imperialism in Southeast Asia. This is going to be a very brief overview of the actions taken by European colonialist countries in Southeast Asia. So looking at the map here, let's dive into first what countries are going to be colonizing and what areas will they be taking control of. England is one of our main colonizers. They already have control of India and Australia, but they're going to continue to expand their power and influence into Southeast Asia, starting in Singapore, then into Burma, and a few other strategic locations. Basically, the British wanted to maintain their trade dominance in Southeast Asia and continue to trade with China and India. They wanted a land route from India into China, which is one of the reasons why they took control of the nation of Burma. The next country that we're going to take a look at is the Netherlands, which was very active through the Dutch East India Company in the South Pacific, establishing trade routes early on with Dutch New Guinea and other islands as well. So the Dutch have a very strong presence in Southeast Asia. France gets into it as well, trying to keep pace with England, and seeing England's dominance and expansion into Southeast Asia, the French take action in the nation of Vietnam. But notice it's the only area where the French are active. They established French Indochina and included future countries such as Laos and Cambodia into that area. Germany, who was always trying to maintain and keep pace with France and England, takes control of the northern portion of the island of New Guinea, which is divided between the Dutch and the British. Portugal, speaking of small colonies, also takes control of a very small portion here in the East Indies. And then after its victory in the Spanish-American War, the United States takes control of the Philippine Islands. So as you can see by the map, Southeast Asia is going to be dominated by European countries as well as the United States. There's one country that was able to maintain its independence, the country of Siam, which is now called Thailand. One of the few countries in Southeast Asia that was able to fend off European expansionist and colonialization. So why take these islands? Well, these islands are filled with great natural resources, resources that are not available in other parts of the world or are in scarce supply. So in terms of the exports, we're looking at coffee, palm oil, rubber, timber, spices, sugar, tea, and tin. These are the main resources from this part of the world that, of course, are going to be now controlled by the colonizing country. So these raw materials and resources are going to be exported back to the mother country or sent to other parts of the world for trade and for sale. Which means that most of the work that's being done in places like the Philippines or Burma or Singapore or any of these other colonies is mostly going to be agricultural work. You're not going to see manufacturing being developed in these colonies. So colonies are mostly based on agricultural work, and it's typically work done by hand. One of the main parts of imperialism is that the imperialized nation is not going to be able to develop industry and manufacturing. That's one of the reasons why they were conquered in the first place. They have raw materials and resources. The mother countries are the ones who have the industry and manufacturing, and many places were not allowed to industrialize. European conquerors wanted to maintain that superiority, and you would not allow your colonies to develop the manufacturing capabilities. So most of the work being done is by the native workers. The conditions on these plantations are pretty terrible. The wages are also pretty terrible. And because they are foreigners and non-white workers, wages and conditions are going to be the least of the concerns of the colonizing country. So, on these colonies throughout Southeast Asia, we're going to see some different forms of colonial control. Let's look at the first one, which is indirect control. Indirect control is when a foreign nation controls a colony through its local leaders and officials with limited self-rule. So this is where I would go in and take control of an island who already has a central government of some sort of leader. That person's going to remain in power. That person is going to maintain their status. I'm going to control the colony through those local leaders, exerting my force and control through the local leaders that have already been established in that nation. This is going to make controlling the colony a little bit easier for Europeans because there's not going to be as much conflict in terms of if you were to have removed the local leadership from its positions. For the most part, life kind of goes on as it normally would. There is going to be a certain reduction in conflict with the native people by taking an indirect control route. This is used by the Dutch as well as by the French in northern Vietnam, but not in southern Vietnam. So through indirect control, the country is officially still independent and still has its own government, but is most definitely under the heavy influence of the foreign power. Well, the opposite of indirect control is direct control, which is when a foreign nation controls a colony directly and assumes all power and authority. In this situation, local leaders are going to be replaced with foreign governors and administrators. So if there were a king of your island, there would no longer be a king of your island. There would be a British administrator who would be in charge now of the island. During direct control, conditions tended to be harsher. Conditions for the native people, the treatment of the native people tended to be a little bit more harsh under this direct control. You would have foreign troops on the ground. You would have a desire to maintain strict control of those people, and that would tend to lead to much harsher treatment. There would also be a greater impact on the native people and culture. We're going to see more assimilation taking place in colonies that have direct control versus indirect control. Under indirect control, cultures and language and religion tended to be left alone, but under direct control, colonies that had that type of government tended to see a little bit more assimilation in terms of changing language and religion and culture. So there's a greater impact on the native people. Direct control will be used by England, France, and Germany in different parts of the world. Another form of colonial control is protectorate. This is where a country or territory with its own government but is influenced and controlled by another nation. Similar to indirect control, being a protectorate means that you keep your sovereignty, you keep your independence as a nation, but you look to your protector to help you make your decisions, and especially to protect you against foreign nations. So in a protectorate, there is a sense of control, and that country becomes dependent upon you, which means you're definitely being able to influence the decisions that they make by maybe threatening to take away that protection from them. Now, did people on these islands and people in these nations resist? Absolutely. There's always going to be a sense of resistance. Some places it's going to be stronger than others. Where there is indirect control, you're going to see less resistance. When there is direct control and the threat is clear and evident, you're going to see more resistance. We have talked previously about how European weapons were able to subdue other places around the world, and this is the case here. So native people and governments are going to resist both before and after colonization, but most of those resistance movements will be futile as European armies possess superior firepower and were able to put down both colonial armies and peasant revolts, which were common in some countries. So colonization in Southeast Asia is pretty thorough. Most of the places in Southeast Asia are going to be colonized by European countries as well as by America. Those resources will be taken and exported for the benefit of the colonizing country not of the colony. There will be some different forms of management of those colonies, either indirectly, directly, or as protectorates. Resistance in the colonies will be put down pretty easily by the conquering nations, and many of these places will remain colonies past World War II.